Hi folks. The upcoming content patch, the Sons of Attila update, is going to be adding a lot of pretty consequential things into War Thunder and making changes to some important in-game systems. I think that this is all going to combine to have a pretty big impact on the game's top tier meta, even like the mid to high tier meta, along with tech tree progression and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's also going to have an impact on this YouTube channel, and if I'm being honest, it's causing me a little bit of mild concern. Some of this has been like stirring around in the back of my head for a while, just with the general direction that the game's been going. So I wanted to kind of do like a thought dump like this and just ramble unscripted for a few about a whole bunch of this crap. So first up, they're adding a Hungarian subtree to Italy, like they added a Finnish one to Sweden. I kind of wish they'd stop doing this. I've said on more than a few occasions, I really think they ought to be adding a unified small nation tech tree, like under a UN flag or something like that, that would include countries like Hungary, India, South Korea, Iran, and so on, that are worth including but don't really have enough stuff on their own to fill out a tech tree. Adding more and more little national subtrees to the existing nations just, I don't know, it kind of feels like it dilutes the existing tech trees. I mean, if they keep doing this, eventually everyone is going to have a MiG-21, an F-16, a T-55, so on and so on, just because they were so commonly used out in the world. I think adding a minor nations like rest of the world unified tech tree would prevent this dilution, and it would still allow for some really great stuff to be added into the game, but the snail has said that idea is off the table, so... Next, we've got some new air-to-air missiles. The R-73 is coming. I mean, technically it's already here, but it's going to be more widespread. And we're also getting the AIM-9M. Now, I'm not going to go too far into the technical weeds here, because the data we have is off the dev server, and it could change. And they'll probably patch both weapons during the first couple of months after the update, as they always do, just to make sure that whatever I say in my aircraft reviews immediately becomes out of date. Anyway, suffice to say, though, that the R-73s and the 9 mics, especially combined with helmet-mounted targeting, are both going to fundamentally change the air combat meta at the top tier. The AIM-9M is a particularly interesting case. I'm not going to go into the history of it here. It would be a much longer discussion, but there was a huge difference in the tracking performance between early versions of the missile and later versions. And it's not clear which we're going to end up getting in the game. I'm expecting that it's going to end up being highly resistant to flares, and along with the R-73's insane off-bore sight tracking, like, traditional dogfight positioning isn't going to provide as much safety as it used to. Plus, planes with, like, less than 60 flares or so, and I'm saying flares here, not total countermeasure slots, so add in some chaff on top of those 60 flares, but planes with smaller numbers of flares are going to have an enormously difficult time competing, in up-close dogfighting and stuff against those weapons. Add to this the general lethality of more modern missiles, like, the spam ram flood that we're going to be getting towards the end of the year. It's going to make air battles a lot shorter, generally speaking. I don't really know how I feel about this. I mean, like, kills are just going to come real quick. And the player base seems relatively split on how to proceed with top-tier air battles going forward. Take the EC maps as an example. I've seen the posts from the AOA energy dogfight meta elitists complaining about the AI objective planes getting in the way, complaining that they can go shoot down 500 people in one match all by themselves because they're just a god among us peasants, but then they still lose the match because someone they perceive as an unskilled noob in a premium plane went and shot down all the recon jets and bombed a base. And they get pissed about it and they hate the EC maps. A lot of those players feel that right or wrong, that air battles should be nothing but short to medium range team PvP deathmatch with cutthroat individual tactics and as little PvE as possible, right? On the flip side, you get players who love the EC maps. They like the idea of planning flight paths to targets, completing mission objectives that bleed ticket points, beyond just, PvP dogfight kills, and maybe they even prefer bombing bases and ground targets to doing individual dogfights. These two halves of the community both have completely valid points of view, and they will never see eye to eye. And in my opinion, it's one of the reasons our player base has a reputation for being pretty toxic sometimes. Now, sure, there's some overlap. It's not a perfect split. People don't fit into little boxes. But I've seen really heated arguments about this stuff on Reddit, the forums, Discord, and even here on YouTube. Now, personally, I think the long-term solution is that Gaijin needs to add more game modes to air battles. Either, make the bots shoot back and include a PvE mode similar to what they did for helicopters, and scale back the PvE content in the current PvP mode, or find some other creative way to resolve this. On a more selfish note, it really kicks my ass to see people arguing about this wedge down in the comments anytime I do a review of a strike aircraft. But, if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll realize that I submit feedback like this and suggestions for ways that the snail could kind of restructure things to improve the game a little. And every time I always get ignored, so I'm a little cynical on this sort of thing, I guess, and I'm expecting this problem to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And that brings us to some of the roadmap updates they're rolling out, and the changes to the tech trees. We got a peek at that, in a web post and recently on the dev server. Now, I'm planning a dedicated video about this topic sometime before the end of the year, but based on what I saw on the dev server, I'm actually kind of optimistic about progression. There are, of course, a few spots in a couple of the tech trees where the way they did the restructuring seems dumb or like it's a deliberate speed bump, so you can stop typing that comment about, no, they put this one plane in a dumb spot. I know, there's a couple that seem like that. But generally speaking, I think these changes are going to let people get into top-tier gameplay a lot faster, if that's what they're going for. Remember, there are a good chunk of the players who are fine doing World War II prop stuff. I mean, they're there. That's legit. And a lot of the higher tier tech progression stuff doesn't really affect them at all. However, these changes also stand, in my opinion, to kind of further reduce the diversity that we get in air battles. I want to wait and see how things develop out through maybe December and January, but I'm really hopeful that we don't get to a point where things devolve into matches where both teams are just nothing but the same plane, even worse than it is now. We'll see. I guess this is one of those things that kind of has potential to go either way, but, I really value having some diversity in team lineups, and the huge variety of all the different vehicles is half of what I like most about the game. But again, time will tell, I guess. I really think that with all of the changes coming, with all the new weapons being added and about to be added, with even more 4th generation jets coming soon, the changes to radar and radar warning receivers, and so on, War Thunder above BR-10 or so is going to be an entirely different game from what it is now by some point early next year. So what does all this mean for Tim's variety? Well, maybe not much, maybe quite a bit. First, the obvious, I'm going to have to redo my radar tutorial. Again. That's annoying, but the next update won't take me as long to produce. I'm not going to bore you with all the minutia, but I've streamlined some of my workflow production process, so the next radar update is probably only going to take me a week from start to finish, instead of taking me over a month like the current one did. Also, with how much new complexity they're adding to radar warning receivers, I'm almost certainly going to have to move that out of my radar guide and make a dedicated guide for the new radar warning receivers on their own. But that won't be super quick, since none of this stuff is documented in any meaningful way by the snail, and they almost never answer my technical questions the way I want them to. I'm going to have to reverse engineer it all myself, just like I do for the rest of my guides, and it just may take a little while, so no promises on the time frame, but I'll get you something. With the new radar warning receiver system, I'm not going to rush and put out a video full of guesses. I'm going to wait, do it right, and try to get you accurate information, even if it takes me a little longer and I lose a lot of those early views as a result. That's fine. I'd rather put out a good video. Now, there's another annoyance. I've mentioned a few times that I produce my routine weekly videos, usually my Wednesday aircraft reviews, about 2 months in advance. This works out well for me because I can put out a video even if I'm on a busy week or something like that, or if I'm working on another project. I haven't missed a weekly War Thunder video release in over 2 years, so the system's kind of working out pretty good for me, right? Well, the problem is, I have a couple of videos produced and ready to publish for jets that might end up getting some changes after the update, at least some minor changes. For example, the Sea Harrier I posted this week. I wasn't planning to release that one until probably like October, but adding the Tech Tree Harrier, the Tech Tree Sea Harrier on the dev server, combined with changes to the UI for the radar warning receiver and stuff, yeah, I needed to publish it basically immediately. I also have 2 more that I need to publish essentially right now, so there's a less risk of them being out of date when they go live. Now, I don't mean like the information I present becoming out of date. Both of these aircraft I'm talking about weren't really changed on the dev server or anything, but I don't like to publish a video that has out-of-date on-screen user interface elements. And for example, if one of them got an updated radar warning receiver with some of those new indicators, the video would look out of date, even if the analysis was still completely current and valid. It also means that I've had to basically abandon the review I was working on right now. I was working on the Mirage F1C 200, the Rank 7 French Premium, but since both the on-screen UI is changing and, frankly, the meta for that bracket is about to be turned upside down, I had to basically just scrap what I was doing, and I'll have to pick it up from scratch at a future point. The good news, though, the other stuff I've got banked up really don't have any risk of UI changes or anything. I've got a super prop bomber coming, a rare helicopter, a mid-tier night fighter, and a couple other early jets. Videos where the review doesn't cover anything that's likely to change, even in the long term. So I can kind of hold on to those for like a rainy day, so to speak. For example, I have a review of the MiG-9 done. And when's the last time they changed the MiG-9? Like 2016? No rush to publish that. So it'll probably be current indefinitely. And I can hold on to that for, one of those weeks where I was just too busy to make a new video. So, thinking about the future for a minute, beyond just, stuff I've already got produced, I'm a little worried about how some of the changes to the meta that I mentioned a few minutes ago, like with the 9 mic coming and all that, are going to impact my review process. Now, I could be totally wrong about all of this, but I'm expecting that by the end of the year, top-tier air matches in War Thunder are going to be incredibly fast-paced, and they're often going to end pretty quick. That's going to really cramp my style in terms of the process I use for capturing the footage that I use in my reviews. As I've mentioned elsewhere, I've actually got like a full video up about this topic, and you should totally check that out. But the footage I use is curated to try and demonstrate different types of situations. How the plane works in different maneuvers, high points, low points, that sort of thing, right? Like, for example, If it's a video about a jet with an unreliable missile, I'll try to include some footage of otherwise good missile shots missing. Or if the guns have a weird cyclic rate, I'll try to include a few seconds of dogfight footage with an opponent flying in between shots even though I had the correct firing angle lined up. Or like if the plane has really great energy performance, I'll try to show some maneuvers where that really helped get a kill. So on and so on, right? Well, with faster-paced matches where everything is a split-second hustle, I'm going to have an incredibly hard time trying to set some of those situations up. Now, like in the review I mentioned of the MiG-9, it was pretty easy for me to set up some situations to demonstrate like its energy performance, for example, because at its BR, combat is pretty slow-paced, and you usually have plenty of time to try and, plan your positioning out and stuff like that. That's more difficult at the top tier, and it's about to become almost impossible, because you're going to be forced into defensive flying and alertness almost immediately after takeoff, even more than you are now. And if I'm doing a review on, like, for example, an F-18 when it eventually gets added, and I'm trying to get footage of its AOA performance working or failing in a turn fight, actually getting that opportunity and getting that footage is going to be incredibly difficult if during the turn fight, I also need to be dumping countermeasures all over the place because the guy I'm fighting has insane off-bore sight weapons. Oh, and I need to be making defensive adjustments nonstop because there's a MiG-29 8 kilometers away, and it's possibly gets a shot off with an R-27 ET while I wasn't looking. Oh shit, here comes a few spam rams. So on and so on, right? Those battles are going to be really exciting to play, and I'm looking forward to it, but it might end up really cramping my style pretty hard in terms of getting footage for the aircraft review videos that I make. And it might take me a lot longer to produce them for high-tier stuff. So it's something that's been causing me a little bit of consternation. I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I've been rambling for a while here. I'll shut up. There are lots of changes coming. I'm expecting in the immediate term the 9 mic and the R73 to have the biggest impact because those weapons are going to be absolutely insane, and they really need to push the BR cap to like 13.3, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.